You ever stop to think about how some event happening thousands of miles away can just completely turn your daily life upside down? Well, today, we're going to trace the fallout from a major global conflict all the way down to the price you pay at your local petrol station. And along the way, we're going to uncover some really surprising human stories of people who got caught right in the middle of it all. So, let's connect the dots. So it all kicks off on this massive global scale. You've got a war breaking out, right? And it's shaking the very foundations of the world economy. But the real question is, how does something that huge connect to something, well, a lot more specific? And this is where it gets really interesting. What in the world does a high-end luxury car, like a Ferrari, have to do with a global energy crisis? I'm telling you, the answer is probably not what you're thinking. And then there's the human cost. We're going to see how this crazy chain of events plunged one family into a total nightmare, a nightmare that lasted for 19 months. And all of it was over about 20 quid's worth of fuel. It's an incredible story. Okay, let's dive in. All right, so our story really starts with that first critical link in the chain, a major artery for the world's energy, and it just suddenly snaps shut. Okay, so picture this. A war in the Middle East suddenly escalates, like way beyond what anyone expected. And at the very first consequence, one of the most important shipping lanes on the entire planet is completely shut down. Just like that. And this one single action is what kicks off a massive global domino effect. So, what are we talking about here? We're talking about the Strait of Hormuz. The best way to think about it is like a giant bottleneck. It's the only way for ships to get from the Persian Gulf, which is packed with oil and gas, out to the open ocean. So you can see, if you control that strait, you basically control the tap for a huge chunk of the world's energy. And to put that into perspective for you, a full 20%, that's 1/5, of the entire world's oil supply has to pass through that one narrow channel. So when it closes, boom, the shock to the global system is just immediate, and it is absolutely immense. So, with that tap suddenly turned off, you can just imagine the chaos. Economies all over the world are sent into a total panic. The scramble for energy is officially on. And look, this isn't just me being dramatic. The International Energy Agency, the IEA, they themselves called it, and I quote, the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. I mean, that is a massive statement. It just shows you how completely unprecedented this crisis was. And you can see the impact almost instantly. Look at this chart. On March 2nd, the price of Brent crude oil, which is a really key global benchmark, it just surged. We're talking over 10% in a flash, hitting around $82 a barrel. And that spike right there is the very first sign of the economic pain that's about to spread. And this is where things really start to spiral, you know? It's not just about oil anymore. Suddenly, Qatar, which is a huge exporter of liquefied natural gas, has to halt all its shipments. That, of course, makes gas prices go through the roof, which then fuels fears of global inflation and even a recession. But it doesn't stop there. It even hits our food supply. Get this, over a third of the world's urea, a critical ingredient for fertilizer, is disrupted, and that starts raising some very real fears about global food shortages. See how it all connects? Okay, so let's zoom in a bit. Let's see how this massive global crisis makes its way from the world stage right down to your local forecourt, where things start to get really personal. So, in a place like the UK, the impact is felt almost right away. Fuel prices start shooting up at their fastest rate in years. Of course, this kicks off a huge political debate about who's to blame. But there's also a darker side effect, a pretty scary surge in crime right there at the petrol station. Now, to really get what's going on, you have to understand that there are two main types of fuel theft. First, you've got your classic drive-off. Pretty simple, right? You fill up the tank and you just speed away without paying. That's straight-up theft, a criminal offense. But then there's something called no means of payment, or NMOP. This is where you fill up, you walk into the shop, and then you claim you can't pay. Now, legally, that's treated as a civil matter, not a crime. And trust me, this little distinction is absolutely key to what happens next. And just look at this breakdown. It's wild. You'd probably think that the classic drive-offs are the biggest issue, right? But it's actually the complete opposite. These no means of payment incidents now make up a staggering 2/3 of all unpaid fuel. For the people who own these petrol stations, this has become a massive, massive headache. So to try and fight back against this wave of theft, the petrol stations turn to technology. But as you're about to see, this high-tech solution ends up creating a whole new and very human set of problems.
And their main weapon in this fight is something called ANPR. That stands for Automatic Number Plate Recognition. Basically, it's a sophisticated system of cameras that reads every single license plate of every car that comes into the station and instantly checks it against these huge databases.
And here's how it works. It's incredibly fast. A car pulls in, the camera scans the plate, and in milliseconds, literally the blink of an eye, it's checked against a blacklist of vehicles that have been involved in thefts or payment problems before. If it gets a hit, the staff gets an alert on their screen, and they can stop a potential theft before it even happens. Pretty clever, right? But what happens when that clever system gets it wrong? This quote from a woman named Naseem Khan, it really shows you the terrifying reality. For her and her family, a simple trip to get petrol turned into this awful public humiliation. She said alarms started going off like there was an armed raid. Why? Because the system had wrongly blacklisted their car. And this is where we really get to the heart of it. The very real and, honestly, often devastating human cost of all these interconnected events. Just take a look at the nightmare this family, the Khans, had to go through. It starts in July 2023. They're accused of stealing just 20 pounds and 1 cent worth of fuel. Because of that, for the next 19 months, they are banned from a network of over 1,300 petrol stations. Then the debt collectors start calling, and that 20-pound bill balloons to over 140 pounds. So they decide to fight it. They get all the way to court in February 2025, ready to plead their case, only to find out the claim had been dropped without anyone telling them. Can you imagine 19 months of pure stress, all from a false accusation? So the Khan family's story is a powerful reminder of what happens when the system fails. But it also makes you wonder, who are the people actually committing these thefts? And I promise you, the answer is going to shatter some stereotypes. You have got to hear this. It's from a petrol station owner in Essex. He says, it can be anyone, from the owner of a rusty Ford Fiesta to a Ferrari. And then he tells this story. One time, an Aston Martin and a Ferrari both filled up and drove off without paying, just 30 seconds apart. He lost 300 quid just like that. I mean, an Aston Martin and a Ferrari? It's just a shocking reminder that when times get tough, you can't assume you know who's feeling the pressure. And so all of this leaves us with a pretty big question to think about, doesn't it? When systems get stressed, who really ends up paying the price? We've seen how a war thousands of miles away can lead to automated cameras creating a living nightmare for an innocent family at a local petrol station. The consequences just ripple out in ways you could never predict. And so often, it's ordinary people, and yeah, sometimes the people you'd least expect, who end up paying the real cost.